All right, all right. So I'm just here tonight for a short stream. I only have maybe like 25, 30 minutes on hand here. So I figured I'd just go live for a couple of minutes. Why not? So hey, how you doing, Defender of Truth? First person in the live chat on the side here. Um, but yeah, I didn't have a particular subject or topic in mind. I just figured I'd go live while I got a couple minutes on hand. One thing interesting to note is we had the individual on a couple of days ago when I was doing the last open panel for atheists and Christians and Hebrew Israelites to have conversation together, and it was actually a pretty good stream. The I believe we had like what 3 or 4 other people on. Everybody was respectful, um, including the atheist. Right, that guy was pretty cool too. I believe his name was Shiva or something like that, right? But the one dude that I first had on there, forget this cat's name, but he was trying to say that like Paul was like a false apostle, right? Like you can't really trust Paul, because he's false. But recently he reached out in the comment section underneath that stream and was like, "Well, yeah, man, I've reconsidered, what I was saying. Apparently, I was in the wrong on that. Just paraphrasing him." And at least he's in the right direction now. That he's not going around and still teaching people that Paul was a false apostle, right? So at least he has that going for him, right? At least he was able to see it. He was in the wrong on that, and that's a good thing. Sometimes people believe things that are incorrect, but then they might consider that they were wrong. Some people that's a hard thing for them to do, but other people are willing to do that. Like I'll give you an example. Like this dummy, fat ass dog that calls himself. He used to be one of Perry Green's right hand dudes, but then he's like, oh well, yeah, Perry's definitely a teacher of God. And then a couple weeks later, he's like, well, yeah, Perry's just evil, right? That guy's definitely evil. But you know what I find funny though? Like the dude will leave Perry's group and still say that Perry's like a cult leader and evil this, evil that, which is true, right? That those are true statements. But the ironic part is the dummy will still go around and teach the same doctrine as Perry Green, right? Like this dummy will sit there and tell you, oh, Christ died so you can continue to do evil as long as you don't call it evil, though, right? That's like the main point. As long as you don't call your actions evil, then it's not evil. It's like, okay, well, what about the billion of like Hindus or atheists in the world who don't believe that their actions that they do are evil because they don't believe that there's any type of gods of any sort that exist? Well, specifically the atheist, right? The Hindus, on the other hand, believe in like what 300 different gods or whatever. But their morality can differ from person to person. But the atheist, they full out reject the idea of any type of gods altogether, right? So they don't believe their actions are wrong. So I mean, does that now mean it's not wrong for them to do any of those things because they don't consider it bad? And remember, these guys, like Perry said, you just don't have to. As long as you don't believe your actions are bad, that means it's not bad. It's like, okay, well, by reasoning then, and that means that the atheists are, not doing anything bad themselves because they don't believe it's bad. then you confront him about it, be like, oh, well, you just have to be a Christian though before that applies. It's like, so these guys are basically contradicting themselves. Once you call them out on their foolery and stupidity, then they'll contradict themselves when it's convenient for themselves. And I find that to be, sad and pathetic. I just find that to be sad and pathetic. Let me see here, bear with me a second. Oh, and then a whole nother thing I want to mention is there was some other dude. I believe we'll call this dude like we'll call this guy Bob or something like that. There was another preterist dude who was in the comment section over the past like 3 days now, and I've been going back and forth with this individual. And the guy's on there talking about, well, the rapture doesn't exist in the Bible. And then I say, well, clearly there is a rapture in the Bible. I mean, sure, it's not depicted like as you see in some of these Hollywood movies. Like if you ever watched a movie called Left Behind, right? They show that people just, like disappear and, planes crash because the pilots disappeared and, so on and so forth, right? There's just people's clothing left everywhere because the people disappeared and the clothing was left. That's not true, right? So there are certainly misconceptions that people have about a rapture, but that doesn't mean that it's not in the Bible, though. Like, say, for instance, the nail in the coffin to prove that it is in the Bible. So all you got to do is read Matthew 24:29. It says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, Son of Man's going to return and set his angels to gather together his elect from all over the world. The word rapture literally means to gather. So it says that he's going to send his angels to gather together his elect. That's literally a rapture, then, by literal definition. So again, there is a rapture in the Bible. It's not how they depict in Hollywood movies or what you hear at the Catholic Church. Like, say, for instance, that this is why I've said that there's different ideas of thought about, the rapture event. There's many different beliefs and views on it. Like, say, for instance, there's something called a secret rapture where people believe that it's going to like happen at any moment, right? It could have been yesterday, it could have been tomorrow, could have been today, at just a random moment in time to catch everybody off guard. Then there's people who believe that it'll happen like in the middle of the tribulation. And then, of course, there's those who believe it happens afterwards. So, again, there's many different thoughts and theories and views as to what it means and the interpretation of it. But to sit there and say that it's not in the Bible altogether, that's just a willfully ignorant thing to say. So this individual, Bob, or whatever this dude's name is, I politely asked him, hey, look, man, instead of, sending 50,000 comments back and forth, how about you just join me live and we can have a friendly conversation? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you don't agree, why don't you just come up here and have a friendly conversation about why we both might see it differently? And the funny part about it is that it turned out this guy's actually a full preterist himself. So the ironic part about it is not only is he saying that rapture doesn't exist at all, but the funny thing is I've talked to literally dozens of other well-known preterists on YouTube who do tell me they do believe in a rapture, but the difference is they believe it happened 2,000 years ago. So it was something past, not in the future. But the point is they believe that it existed, though, right? They believe that it was in the Bible, but it already happened. So I just find it strange. Here is a preterist that doesn't believe it happened at all, apparently. But yet some of the leaders of the preterist, viewpoint on the internet teach that it did happen or existed. So this individual is just, I wouldn't say he's lost in the sauce. He's drowning in that sauce, right? He's not lost in the sauce. He is drowning in the sauce. The dude doesn't know what the hell is going on. His brother asked, have you heard of Project Bluebeam? Yeah, I mean, basically that's old news at this point. Everybody's heard about that. Matter of fact, a fun fact for you. The very first video I did on YouTube back in 2016 was about Project Bluebeam, right? That was the very first video I ever did on YouTube, which of course you can't find that today because I lost that channel a dozen years ago or whatever, or I should say half dozen years ago. Um, but yeah, everybody knows about that at this point. That's basically old news at this point. Let me see. I'm looking to something off on my side real quick. Yeah, I gotta turn the brightness down of this. I've been having a migraine today, so gotta turn my screen brightness down. Now I don't know how people walk around, you know, with a full lit brightness on their device. It's crazy to me. Like how the hell do y'all have such high quality brightness? But y'all are sitting in front of that screen all day. Like y'all don't have problems with like dry eye or anything like that. Now, don't get me started about computer screens. That's a whole nother conversation. The truth is that most people today are in front of screens for about 11, 12 hours a day. And that's just what it is. Some people do that because they're watching stuff online or playing games, or other people are working, online on the computer. So it just depends. And brother said, "Yeah, my mom does that with her brightness on her phone." Yeah, I hear you. I don't get how people can can stand that. And one thing that pisses me off is when I go outside, the rare occasion that I'll actually touch grass and go outside. The as soon as I grab the phone out, the brightness immediately turns all the way up. It's like, there should be a setting where I can set the brightness to whatever I want it to be, and it won't turn up or down unless I deliberately go in and turn it up or down. You know what I'm saying? Like, it shouldn't automatically adjust. So some people might find that helpful, but I find that to be annoying. Like, I'll give an example, right? The bed where I lay is by a window, right? So say at like 5 in the afternoon, the sun's in the direction where it shines directly through the window. So if I'm laying there, it hits the phone screen, the light immediately goes back up, and I have to like fight it for like 20 minutes to keep it down, because every time just a fraction of sunlight gets on it, it'll immediately turn back up. It gets annoying sometimes. And a whole nother thing, speaking of phones, I don't get why everybody out here, I don't get the hype about having these brand new phones with like, 7 cameras on it, and costing, $1,500 to $2,000. Like, I mean, seriously, it's so bad now that I even see, little elementary school students walking around with, $1,500 phones. I mean, it's like, Christ. As I said, I grew up in poverty myself, so the way I get by is just using cheap ass phones, right? You don't need a phone that's worth more than $100. You know what I'm saying? Like, $100 phone is going to do everything you need it to do. Sure, it might not have 7 cameras on it, but I mean, do you really need more than 1 or 2 cameras on your phone? You know what I'm saying? Like I just don't get it. Like, what's the point spending, 1,500, 1,800, $2,000 on a brand new phone, that which they're gonna come out with a brand new version in 12 months from now, and then that's gonna cost another extra couple $100 on top of that, most likely. You know what I'm saying? It's pathetic. Everybody out here seems to be just, doing away with their old phones, not because there's anything wrong with the phone, but because they want to, keep up with the modern trend. Jay said, "What's up? How's it going?" I mean, not a whole lot, man. I just had a couple minutes on hand, so I figured I'd go live. I'm not bringing anybody up on here tonight though, because I am limited with the time I have. But if there's any questions or comments, y'all can put them down below. Same thing with some of these electronics out here as well. Like somebody earlier, like on Clash of Clans, I was reading the clan chat earlier, and somebody asked, is anybody gonna go get that new Switch that they're coming out with? And I was like, isn't that thing like $500 for that new Switch? I mean, we got the original Switch over here. I believe it came out like 6 or 7 years ago now. Nothing wrong with them, right? But the whole other thing with the new Switch is the games for it are like $80 or $90 now. So why the hell? Who the hell out here is going to pay $80 or $90 for just a little ass game for the new Switch? Whereas before the games used to be like what, 40, 50, maybe $60. You know, if I buy a game, I'm gonna buy the disc. I'm not gonna just buy one that's just on the device, and if anything happens, I'll lose the uh the ownership of it, right? Like, say for instance, like when I go on the PS4, I always get advertisements for buying, Black Ops 6 or Modern Warfare 3, or so on and so forth. And it's like, wait, if you buy it online, that means you don't even own a disc for it. So if anything happened, like if you lose your accounts, or whatever happens, or the device is destroyed, you're gonna lose access to all of those things. So why the hell would you not just want to buy the physical disc so you always have it? I don't get it. I just don't get it. Yeah, about the question there about God's name, I'll just tell you that there's many different variations and abbreviations that people will give. Like some people say Yahweh, some say Yahuwah, Jehovah. Um, we use Yahweh over here, but all I'll tell you is that nobody's going to know for sure. Nobody's going to know for 100% until, God sends his son back and sets up that new kingdom. So, whatever translation or interpretation that you go by, you really got to take it all down to perspective. None of them are 100% accurate. That's all I'm going to tell you. When asked, do you think still keeping the Sabbath is required? Yeah, it is still required. I mean, sure, you're not going to be able to perfectly do it. Like, say, for instance, some people might have to work on it, but if the Bible forbids that, so again, you can't perfectly keep it. But if you can, then you do. I try to get off work on those days. But again, the way everything is right now, there's no living person on this earth who can keep all the laws perfectly. But what does that mean? Does that mean that we don't try to keep it though? Because that's what people will pretend, right? They'll pretend, oh, well, you can't keep them perfectly, so don't try to. It's like, no, that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says they're supposed to live according to the commandments, but of course, you can't perfectly keep all of them. And I believe I brought this something similar to this up with that individual that called into the last show about Paul, where we talked about that for a little bit. But yeah, anybody telling you that they keep all of the commandments perfectly, that person is just a liar. It's just not true. Bear with me for a moment. Well, again, the question about the names, I'll tell you, according to the Paleo Hebrew, would be pronounced Yahweh. Right. So the Paleo Hebrew would be like the ancient Israel Hebrew. So that's why we pronounce it Yahweh. But if you use modern day Hebrew, it would be pronounced a different way. So again, it just goes down to the interpretation and the language that you're reading it in. That's what I'll tell you. But again, I don't think it's something that should really be up for a great debate in today's, talking terms. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not something that any side's going to have like a great amount of evidence to back their claim. But Yahweh is how it would be pronounced in the ancient Paleo Hebrew. So that's why I'd hold to that particular pronunciation. Yo, my guy, you still going around saying that Satan is actually a woman? I mean, that's interesting. That's interesting perspective. Just out of curiosity, like, is there a particular like verse that you go to the point where Satan has like a feminine spirit to him or something like that, or like what would you point to suggest that Satan is not actually like a male figure, but rather a female figure? I mean, I haven't seen that in the Bible. I mean, so I'd be curious to see where you'd come up with that. Hold on a second. Yeah, it was funny. I saw a video the other day. This guy Eric, aka Lionheart, had a conversation with that Preterist dude, and this is pretty damn funny. So I'm gonna do a whole commentary on that when I get the chance to do so. But you could tell in this conversation that the Preterist dude he lost. I mean, the dude at the end had to resort to childish name calling instead of actually addressing the conversation at hand. I find that sad, and that's typically what the preterist side of the argument has to do when they get cornered like that. When they can't prove their statements, when they get cornered, they have to, lash out and, childish, um, attacks and childish semantics as well. And I find that sad and pathetic, but it shows that they don't have the winning side of the argument. The truth is, all of these preterist conversations I watch on the internet between, different people, I probably see like 50 different channels have conversations about it over the last couple of years. And like 99% of the time, the preterist that's on having a conversation, it's very easy to stump them. It's very easy to prove it. They don't got a clue what they're talking about. A lot of these guys are just repeating nonsense that they heard on the internet and really don't have much of a clue beyond that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's really pathetic and just childish to me. I don't know how any person could claim it they were a preterist in the year 2025. I mean, what about the fact that the largest land war in 80 years is taking place right now? Which, fun fact, by the way, I saw that just yesterday there was, a attack on the Crimean Bridge, which they destroyed one of the pillars, and then, of course, last week there was a whole operation they had where they destroyed like what 20 planes, like what 1,000, 2,000 miles into Russia. Look it up. I believe they entitled it Operation Spiderweb or something like that. Look it up on YouTube. You'll see what I'm talking about. But these predators. Oh, it doesn't matter, man. We're living in the kingdom, right? It don't matter. We're in the kingdom. What about Isaiah chapter 2? It says that the nations wouldn't learn war anymore under Christ. So how the hell could we be under Christ today if there's like 25 different conflicts going on around the world right now? Oh, man, doesn't matter. Oh, it all was fulfilled in 70 AD. It's like, yeah, 70 AD in my ass. No, it wasn't. Some of these guys are just a bunch of fruitcakes, and knuckleheads. I'm really surprised that Jill's not a full preterist, because that's the type of, retard that shows the cognitive dissonance, that you would suspect him to be a preterist. But amazingly, he's not, though, at least as of today. But I suppose that could change in, a year or two. Who the hell knows? Let me see. Well, I did say I was only gonna be on here for a half an hour, so I'm gonna start winding this down here because as I said, I got limited time. All right, what I'm gonna do. If anybody made it to the end of the live stream, put hashtag star in the comment section down below. If anybody made it to the end. He said there's a reference to the whore in the New Testament. Well, I'm not sure what you're talking about because the whore, the great whore, is talking about America in the New Testament. So I'm not sure what you'd be alluding to there. Matter of fact, perhaps you should do a video, take 5 minutes out of your day and do a video explaining why Satan's a woman. Yeah, no disrespect, man, but I find that to be a loony thing to believe. Yeah, but hey, you're welcome to believe that. But perhaps you should do a lesson on that. Wouldn't hurt to do 5 minute lesson on that sometime in the future if you get a chance. Said the spirit of disobedience is feminine. So that's symbolic, a literal representation, and parabolic. Well, the Bible refers to the truth as a woman, right? Calls her a she or a her. So I can agree with you that sometimes it can, some things can be metaphorically referred to as a woman, but Satan is not one of those things. But hey, the burden of proof would be on you to demonstrate that claim. But anyway, I'm gonna wrap the stream up there. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.